who controls America? An elite group of people who function in a stratosphere globally and beyond the Constitution, beyond the reach of government. They have enormous resources.
Every 4 years, all eyes lock on one office, one oath, one person. The cameras roll, the motorcades glide, and the nation watches, convinced that real power just walked into the room. But behind that spotlight is something harder to see. Layers of influence that don't speak at press briefings, never campaign, and rarely get questioned. As policies shift and decisions ripple across the world, the question grows louder. Is the president really in charge? Or just the most visible piece on a much bigger board? Well, let's break it down.
That's what I think.
The people who rule America?
People are behind the screen. They are behind the screen.
Invisible.
To the general public.
And do you think people really know what's going on?
To some extent, yes, and to some extent, no.
Not everyone who runs the country wears a title the public recognizes. Behind every president is a team of insiders, names most people never hear, yet voices that shape almost every decision. Chiefs of staff, senior advisors, policy directors, they don't need the spotlight. They control the access. Take the chief of staff. They decide which stakeholders, experts, elected representatives, and other Washington officials get access to the president. They manage the schedule, control the flow of information, and often speak more to the president than any cabinet secretary ever does. During Biden's early presidency, Ron Klain wasn't just a staffer. He was a gatekeeper who helped steer everything from pandemic response to economic strategy, and it doesn't stop there. National security advisors weigh in on military actions before generals do. Speechwriters craft entire messages that set the tone for global reactions. Legal counsels quietly decide what the president can and can't say in public. Even personal relationships come into play. Some presidents lean more on longtime aides than actual department heads.
The sort of day-by-day run-of-the-mill reality is that those who have high positions in politics and strong connections with moneyed interests and the moneyed interests themselves run the country.
These people sit in the background during meetings, yet they help draft decisions that affect millions.
And even those who vote are not represented fairly. People in smaller states have more representation.
So while the public sees one person at the podium, behind that figure is an entire structure making sure only certain voices reach them. And what gets filtered out often changes everything. Then there's a reason some policies seem to skip public debate and slide straight into law. And it usually starts with someone wearing a tailored suit, not a name tag. These are the paid representatives for corporations and special interest groups. They aren't just visitors in Washington, they're regulars, and they don't come to take photos. They come with talking points, drafts of bills, and checkbooks. Every year, billions are spent on lobbying. More than $4.2 billion was spent in 2023 alone. The pharmaceutical industry alone shelled out over $380 million to influence Congress. And it shows. Drug prices stay high, patent protections get extended, loopholes stay open. Inside Capitol Hill, staffers often know which industries are watching their votes. Lobbyists provide them with full bill language, legal backing, and campaign support if they stay in line. It's fast, it's efficient, and it works. Even presidents can't sidestep it. Legislative priorities from the White House get reshaped in committee meetings filled with pressure from these groups. A single call from a top donor or corporate lobby can stall an entire proposal before it even gets a hearing. And while the public sees the final bill with a proud signature, the real edits may have happened months earlier, across the street from the Capitol, inside a private office, over catered lunch. So if policy is being drafted, funded, and passed with this much outside influence, who's actually writing the future of the country? Well, it gets deeper, because when you get to realize that presidents don't just win elections, they're funded into office, it takes you to a whole new level. Did you know that funding doesn't come from bake sales or small dollar donors alone? It comes from billionaires, lobby networks, and super PACs that operate with one goal: access. Not for the sake of a handshake, but for influence. Campaigns cost hundreds of millions. In 2020, nearly $14 billion was spent across the presidential and congressional races. Much of that came from less than 1% of donors. These people don't wait for a president to reach out. They meet them long before the race begins. Think about how super PACs work. They can raise unlimited funds and spend them freely, often to back the exact message a candidate needs to win, while keeping the donors' hands clean. There are no meetings listed on official calendars, no transcripts, just outcomes. Sheldon Adelson poured over $200 million into Republican campaigns. Wall Street executives bundled tens of millions for both parties. That kind of money doesn't vanish after election night. It stays in the room when decisions are made.
Yeah, I mean, corporations are free now due to Citizens United and a couple of other court rulings to give more money than they have ever been allowed to be before. And that is certainly a threat to our democracy, because what it does is it drowns out the voices of regular people.
And when donors fund the rise, they expect a return. Sometimes it's a tax cut, sometimes it's deregulation, sometimes it's silence. So when billionaires aren't just backing the race, but helping shape what happens after, it raises the next question: whose interests are actually being served? Not the citizens, and it might even be actually the first family. You see, not every power player in the White House wears a badge or holds a government job. Some walk through side doors. Some sleep under the same roof. And often, they're the only ones whose influence doesn't get checked by votes or hearings. During Joe Biden's presidency, reports surfaced of Jill Biden attending top-level policy meetings, weighing in on strategy, and even reviewing White House hires. Not as a political advisor, as a trusted partner. Staff noticed, cabinet members noticed, her voice wasn't ceremonial, it carried weight. Then look at the Trump administration. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner weren't just attending events. They held official titles and ran point on everything from prison reform to Middle East diplomacy. They operated as senior advisors with broad portfolios. Without going through the vetting most officials face, the power here isn't always direct. Sometimes it's in who gets a second chance, or who doesn't get challenged. Family members can reinforce priorities, block certain topics, or become the quiet echo in a president's ear when no one else is in the room. Then we have the interesting corner, because every president speaks, but the message only lands if the media lets it through. The headlines, the sound bites, even the angles chosen for coverage. Most of it flows through just a handful of powerful companies. 6 media giants now own the vast majority of US television news and streaming platforms.
So if you're looking at who rules America or who owns America, it's the same people that propagandize to America.
Their boardrooms overlap with industries that have a stake in what gets said and what stays silent. Energy, defense, pharmaceuticals. These aren't just advertisers. They're often investors in the same networks delivering the news. And the result? Political framing isn't always based on facts. It's based on business. Stories that affect shareholder value get handled differently. Narratives are adjusted to avoid friction. One channel might push urgency, another might stall it. Either way, the full picture rarely gets through. Even when presidents want to challenge corporate power or push an uncomfortable agenda, coverage can soften the blow or bury the details. And it's not just the media. Presidents come in with plans. Some want to shake up foreign policy. Others promise to clean up spending or push through sweeping reform. But once they get inside, they hit a wall, one built over decades by agencies that don't leave when administrations change. The Department of Defense, the CIA, the Department of Justice. These aren't just support systems. They're institutions with their own priorities, long timelines, and leaders who know how to wait out any 4-year plan. Career officials, directors, and department heads often remain in place while cabinets shuffle and press secretaries rotate. Even when a president tries to redirect an agency, the shift takes years. Orders get interpreted, reports get delayed, policies stall in legal reviews. Some officials quietly resist behind closed doors, especially when they believe a directive clashes with national interest, legal precedent, or internal protocols. Whistleblowers have revealed how surveillance programs continued under new administrations even after public backlash. Internal memos have shown dissent over military strategies that presidents thought were settled. In some cases, agencies have acted first, only informing the White House after the fact.
Presidents come and go, but there's a kind of permanent establishment, what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex.
This isn't conspiracy, it's structure. And while stability matters, it also means certain parts of the government operate beyond full executive control. So the question isn't just what the president wants to do, but whether the machinery underneath will even move. Yet some of the biggest forces don't wear uniforms or hold office. Not every policy starts in the White House. Some begin years earlier, in think tanks, private forums, and research institutes funded by people whose names never appear on a ballot. These places don't make the news, they shape what makes it. Groups like the Heritage Foundation, Brookings Institution, and Center for American Progress publish white papers, host closed-door panels, and brief senior staff across both parties. Their reports often land straight on the desks of lawmakers. Sometimes, word for word, their ideas show up in legislation. Behind these, think tanks are billionaires and global donors, some aligned with corporate interests, others with geopolitical goals. And the funding isn't symbolic, it steers the priorities. It decides which issues get years of attention and which ones stay on the shelf. Then there are global summits, the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg meetings, quiet spaces where former leaders, CEOs, and defense contractors gather with current officials. No microphones, no transcripts, just influence. These networks don't need to pressure anyone. Their power comes from consistency. They set the tone, introduce the frameworks, and shape how decisions are even framed inside the White House. So by the time a policy lands in the public conversation, it's often been filtered through layers of private influence most people never hear about. So, who's really running the country? Well, as we have seen, across every chapter, a pattern shows up. Decisions shaped by advisors before they hit the desk. Policies written by lobbyists before debates even start. Donors funding campaigns with silent expectations. Corporations stepping into closed meetings. Media filters controlling what the public sees. Agencies resisting from within. And think tanks laying the groundwork before a single vote is cast. Each layer doesn't cancel out the presidency. It surrounds it, redirects it, slows it down, or speeds it up depending on who benefits. And that's where the real power sits. In networks, in deals, in structures that don't change when a new leader walks in. So while the White House holds the office, the system behind it holds the leverage. And that leaves us with a final thought. When we look at power in America, are we watching leadership or just the performance of it? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. In the meantime, watch out next video, you will be stunned.